Hockey? Is there Mollie?
Sam! Look at this whole big production.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Sam?
Nice to see you.
You ready? Has it even set in yet that this is the last ride for you?
He goes to the net! He scores! He scores! The Rangers win! Rebound! Score! Moves in! He shoots! He scores! He scores! Rangers! Rangers! Rangers win! Nato around the net. Nato puts it. Score! Score! The Rangers win! The Rangers win! They're going to the finals! The Rangers win! Here comes Bore against Mike Richter. Saved by Richter! The waiting is over! The New York Rangers are the Stanley Cup champions! And this one will last a lifetime!
I know it's there, but I've kind of pushed it down the road. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping, as you know, because we've spoken about it, I'm hoping for a nice long run. Mm-hmm. The longer it goes, the better I'll feel. I think it'll probably hit me somewhere in the March or April days when the games start to dwindle down to single digits, and I realize that there aren't going to be many more games left. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the mixed emotion because I love the games so much. Mm-hmm. The games, every game is great to me, and it can be 6-1 or 2-1 or 1-0 or 5-4 in overtime. The games are great and the players are great, and I look forward to every one.
I mean, we're in a place where you have been several times. You spent a lot of time down here right by the ice. I mean, I always wanted to ask you, did you ever play hockey?
No. No, I did not. But when I grew up as a kid, I think the seasons were more defined. Mm-hmm. So we were able to enjoy baseball and then football and hockey and basketball, and yes, they overlapped a little bit, but you had some separation and enough to get into each sport. Yeah. And it was almost a regular thing growing up in Brooklyn that on Sundays we'd jump on the subway, and our parents didn't worry about it, and we'd go to Madison Square Garden, the old garden, on 8th and 49th and 50th. And when the doors opened at 4:30, we raced up to the balcony and tried to get the best seats we could get and watch and those were years in the late 50s where the Rangers weren't the best team around. They struggled, but it was fun.
You were still supporting.
You wanted to go there. It was an exciting sport then. It's always been exciting to watch. And I think the way I got into it is for a time I lived just off of Fort Hamilton Parkway and 51st Street in Brooklyn, the Borough Park section. And a block over was this huge park, cement covered, but on weekends, mostly on Sundays, Sunday mornings, they'd play roller hockey games, and there were great games. And we'd play basketball, and then they'd say, okay, got to get off the basketball court because there's going to be a hockey game going on. And you just sit in the bleachers and watch the roller hockey. And then the next best thing was going to the ice hockey games. So it's a sport that I grew up loving. Baseball was the sport that I played, but I think the best thing I did on ice was officiate a charity hockey game while holding on to the boards.
I was going to say, did you have to hold it? No falls, I hope.
No falls.
When did it occur to you that you wanted to go into play-by-play?
When you graduate college and you realize that you're not quite good enough to take that next step up to the pros. I had a good college baseball career. I was captain of my teams in high school, freshman college, varsity college. It was a great experience. I loved playing, but you realize, okay, you're not quite good enough. What's the next best thing? The next best thing is being around the games. Yes. and that's play-by-play. And I grew up at a time where we had one TV in the house, so I was out playing, and I would take my transistor radio and I'd listen to Yankee games and I'd listen to basketball games at night in the house and there wasn't much hockey on until the early 60s when the Rangers started to make the playoffs. Hockey made a comeback on the radio. So it was a lot of listening to games and appreciating the great announcers that we had here in New York, Mel Allen and Marty Glickman and Red Barber, and then along came Marv Albert, and the greatness continued. And those were the people that influenced what I wanted to do. I wanted to be around the games. And Jim Gordon, who was my predecessor on New York Rangers hockey, took me under his wing when he was still a morning anchorman at WINS Radio, and at night he would do Knicks basketball, and later it was Rangers hockey, and he was my mentor. And it just, one thing grew to another. First I was doing stats on the New York Knicks radio network, and then he would critique my tapes that I would do when I would work for United Press International Audio Network, now defunct, but I would come cover games at night. I'd work in the morning on sports reports, do the sports reports, do feature interviews, and then at night come to games. Well, I would take a period and go off to the side of the press box here at the Garden and do some play-by-play. So when they wanted to hear a tape of me doing play-by-play,
You had it ready.
here it is.
When did it occur to you that you were quite good?
I don't know that you ever think that. I think when you feel it when people respond to what you're doing and compliment what you're doing and take notice of what you're doing. And then, of course, when they hire you and you keep your job, then you know you're doing something right. It was, I had a lot of luck along the way, and a lot of good people helped me along the way. And as I mentioned, my predecessor, Jim Gordon, the way I started here at the Garden, he was supposed to fill in for Marv Albert on a Knicks-Nets radio game, February 7th of 1977, I believe. I think that's right.
That would be very impressive, Sam.
And Jim got sick, couldn't do the game, and they asked him if he knew of someone who could fill in for him. And he recommended me, and I'm still here.
The rest is history. I mean, but you, as you've alluded to, you haven't done just hockey. I mean, you were a boxing commentator from 1982 to 93. You've done the Olympics, Salt Lake City in 2002 to be specific, and you've called NFL games on Fox for more than 2 decades. What would you say is your most prominent memory from those other sports outside of hockey that come to mind for you?
Well, I think a couple of things pop into my head. One, of course, even though it's hockey related, but it's also world related, and that's the 1980 Olympics in Lake Placid. I was there for United Press International, and I covered all the hockey games that the U.S. played. Remember that first game where they tied 2-2 with Sweden? And I remember standing next to Dave Silk's mom, and she was nervous, and I was covering the game and trying to keep an eye on what was going on. She was trying to watch Dave play the game. But that was part of it. And then the broadcast center up in Lake Placid was in the high school. And outside of the high school was the track, which they flooded. That became the speed skating rink. So we would cover speed skating from the second floor of the high school. But that was one of the most memorable things. And as time has gone on, people realize how huge an event the U.S. winning the gold medal was up in Lake Placid. But that's one of the things that always sticks out. And I go back to the point where I wasn't a full-time broadcaster yet, but when the Knicks won the NBA championship in 1970, I was there doing statistics for Jim Gordon on the Knicks radio network. And when Willis Reed limped out onto the court, you know, what greater moment? And then Walt Frazier having the game of his life, and the Knicks winning their first NBA championship in 1970, and that was one of those memorable moments. I wasn't doing play-by-play, though Jim, to his memorable generosity, I would do the stats, and then we'd get to halftime, and he would turn to me and push his mic over and say, "They're your stats, you do them." So I would do the stats on the air at halftime and at the end of the game, and that was kind of a forerunner to what I wound up doing. But it's things like that that really stick in my mind, and you know, I've just been lucky to cover so many different events. You know, you talk about boxing, and you know, here at the Garden, boxing was huge. Everybody in the early 80s had boxing and on the air, and the Garden developed fighters who then went on to become champions. I did many of Mike Tyson's early fights. He used to come to the old, it was called the Felt Forum, now the theater, and he would sit behind us. There was Mike Tyson sitting behind. We'd walk out after, you know, hey, what did you think of this fight and this six-rounder? And this guy became one of the great champions of all time. But I worked at the time with John Condon, who was Mr. Boxing here at the Garden, and he was the one that put together the Ali Frazier fight, one of the most memorable events ever here at this at the Garden. But those are the things that you know, away from hockey, I think about. Hockey is still the greatest event of all time, is the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup here at the Garden. And the kid from Brooklyn who grew up going to Ranger games was able to call that game and that championship.
I was going to say, nothing ever measured up to hockey.
No,
did it?
with that you can't. It's one of those memorable moments, those special moments. Here is a team that's won one championship in over 80 years, and I was able to call those games and those great players, future Hall of Famers, and it still brings chills to me to think about that night and that championship and the afterglow and the aftermath and the parade and the great people that were involved. I still remember my wife and I driving Rod Gilbert over to the auction house where they had the victory party and the Stanley Cup is there, and Rod was, you know, just thrilled as can be. Mr. New York, Mr. Ranger, remembered, I mean, we had a great time going over to that party.
You've been commuting to Madison Square Garden for work for over 4 decades. I mean, what do you remember about your first memory from the old Madison Square Garden, and what is it like to have the Garden be your office?
It's like another home. You know, it's undergone some changes, but it's still the place where you walk in and the security people, the ushers, the people who take care of the fans in the stands, everybody's, "Hi Sam, how are you?" And it's like being around your family, your extended family. But the phrase, "the world's most famous arena," really fits, because anywhere you go and any sport, anyone who's involved in sports knows Madison Square Garden. And to have that as your place where people can relate right away, "Oh, you must be really special because you've been at Madison Square Garden so many years." I mean, this is part of the fabric of New York City, and to be part of the Garden is extra special.
Take me back to the day when you first found out that you were going to be the main broadcaster for the Rangers. How did that come about, and do you remember the first person you told?
It was a difficult time, a bit of a difficult time, and I'll explain why. I started doing games, as I mentioned, in 1977. Started with basketball, filling in for Marv Albert on radio on basketball.
Yep.
And then they came to me and said, "Can you do hockey?" And that's when I had those tapes that I did in the press box.
You were like, I got him
Yeah,
right here.
I can do hockey, sure. And they listened to the tapes, and suddenly I was now doing fill-in for Marv Albert on radio. And then what evolved was television. In 1982, the Garden went to 3-hour block programming. And I was hired by Joe Cohen, who was the president of the Garden at the time, to be the host of Knicks basketball, of Rangers hockey, and then, but part of the deal was when play-by-play games became available, I was the #1 guy on the fill-in. So that happened. Now we get to 1984, and the executive producers, there were two, Pete Silverman and Phil Harmon, and they came to me and said, we're going to make a change. We'd like you to do full-time, be the full-time play-by-play man for Rangers hockey. And what made that especially tough was I was succeeding Jim Gordon. No one helped me more in my career and gave more of his time to me than Jim Gordon. And I said, I don't know if I can do that. And they said, Sam, we're going to make a change. You're the one we want to put in. We're going to make a change. If it's not you, it'll be someone else. And when it's put to you in that regard, it was something that I wrestled with, and I've talked to Jim about it. It was very tough. It was tough for him because he was being replaced, and for me, as much deep down inside as I knew how big a step this was in my career, it was there was a little bit of a tug of war inside. But I did accept it with the guidance of the people here at the Garden. And obviously, I'm very thankful that I did, because it's been very special.
So you've had 3 long-term partners in the booth since then. Yep.
2 long-term, one I got a...
One
Phil
was quick.
Esposito, I got him 2 years, I got him a good job as the
And way
GM.
too quick, way too quick. From what I heard, it was way too quick of a stint for you guys. But you got Phil Esposito, John Davison, and Joe Micheletti. Let's go down the list here, shall we? I mean, Esposito, considered one of the greatest players the game has ever seen, a former Rangers head coach and GM. I feel like working with him had to have been a unique experience, especially because you covered him as a player. What was that dynamic
Covered
like?
him as a player. What's the dynamic? You walk in to the first full-time job and you're with a Hall of Famer. So number one, I mean, I was always in awe of him as a player. There was a time when I disliked him as a player because he was a Boston Bruin. And
Understandably.
they beat us in the 70s. I mean, come on. But Phil was a great player and a great person. He just loved to have fun. You know, he just wanted to have fun. He wanted to have a good time. And Phil and I knew each other from his playing days, and then afterwards he went right up to the broadcast booth and worked with Jim Gordon. He was the analyst. He succeeded Bill Chadwick, and so at the time I was hosting the games, so I knew Phil very well as far as the broadcasts were concerned. Phil just wanted to have a good time. It didn't matter what was going on. I would say to him, Phil, come to the morning skates, and you get to know the players and what's going on. Sure, you do your preparation. He said, no, I can't.
He didn't need
I
to
said,
be doing
Phil, you got it. It's part of the preparation. He said, that's your job. He said, if I go, I'll be too much of a distraction. So I said, Phil, if you don't go, you won't know the players at all. He said, don't worry. Games would go on, and somebody would come in, make a great shot, or a great big hit, or a great save, and he'd say, Sam, where'd they get this player from? And with Phil, I had to be fully prepared for anything. So, but we had good times, and Phil then became general manager of the Rangers, and to his great credit, he brought hockey to Florida, and look what's happened.
Right.
So Phil was a great hockey person and a great guy to work with, and a good guy to be around. We had in that short period of time, we had some really good times. We had some great discussions with Herb Brooks when Herb was coach of the Rangers. We'd have some great talks. We'd go into the room before the game, or Herb's office, mini office, and we'd go over the roster and we'd talk things. Couple of great hockey people, but Phil was terrific because he was respected. He was a Hall of Fame player. He was as good as it gets. He was a Stanley Cup champion, and it was great to be around.
Let me tell you, he told me he liked to have a lot of fun with you, because when I gave him a call yesterday, he had so much to say about his Sam bone that he likes to call you. He told me a story he said he thought it was one of his first or second games with you, and he came up to the booth early, and there was an electrician in there, and he turned on the lights, and the electrician was like furious at him. And to the point where the electrician's office gave MSG a call and threatened to not turn the lights on for the game. What do you remember that?
I don't remember the specifics. I do remember it was a time, look, union people, and I'm a union person, and I respect them and respect their work and their positions, but it was strict. You didn't touch the light. I mean, I had a situation once where we were doing a charity game, and Gordie Howe was playing in the charity game, and he skated over to the bench, and I had him, Gordie, can you do it? We want to do a couple of minutes. And I told the producer, I've got Gordie Howe here. I need to turn on the light. He said, you can't turn on the light.
Don't touch that light.
Don't touch the light. I said, but it's Gordie Howe. It's Mr. Hockey. Don't touch the light.
Not even for Gordie Howe?
It was really strict. So when Phil recalls that story, I know it's true because it was a no-no. Very, very strict. So Phil has a great memory.
Yeah, he told me that you were like, Phil, just apologize. We got to make sure that we have this game. Just apologize.
That's right. Otherwise, the lights don't go on, and we're not going on camera, Phil.
I got such a kick out of that. But I mean, let's see, John Davidson, 20 seasons with JD. How did you see your relationship with him evolve over time, being broadcast partners for so long?
John and I, to this day, are very close friends. The families grew up together. John, I knew, again, from his playing days. John was always friendly, gregarious. When he came back in 1980, he was the third, when he finished playing, injuries cut short his career. When John was healthy, he was a great goaltender because he was athletic. He was a big goalie in an era when most of the small goalies were the best goalies in the league. But here was John, 6'5", and when he was healthy, he stopped everything, and his legs were flying, and his glove and his arm was flying, and he would make all the saves. And they went to the Stanley Cup Finals because John was great in 1979 that year. That was the best ever. So his career gets cut short. He becomes the third man in the booth. It's now Jim Gordon, Phil Esposito, John Davidson, and he wasn't comfortable in that role. He went up to Canada and covered the western portion of Canada, Edmonton, Calgary, and he was their Hockey Night in Canada's big broadcaster, John Shannon, who's just an iconic figure up in Canadian television, a guy who ran Hockey Night in Canada for many, many years, helped teach John the broadcast business and how to be a broadcaster. And John came back in 1986 when Phil stepped up to become general manager of the Rangers. The logical choice was John Davidson.
Right.
He was the best there was. And he was brought back to Madison Square Garden, and we had a great relationship prior, and our friendship grew and grew, and is still strong as ever. No one taught me more about preparation than John Davidson.
Really?
Because when John prepared for a broadcast, he knew what was going on around the league. He knew every team, every player, because he had satellite receivers. Some legal, some, I don't know, questionable, but I won't say.
Don't quote you.
No, but John was in touch and in tune with every team in the league. And I realized just in order to keep up with him and be conversant with him, I had to do something. So I got this big, monstrous satellite dish, had it installed on top of my house, and I was able to watch games from all over the country. And that was really the start of kind of advanced preparation, watching those games. So if something came up and John wanted to reference it, at least I knew what the heck he was talking about. So, but no one had a greater rapport with players, having been a player, with general managers, with coaches, with executives of teams than John. And to his credit, Joe does the same thing. Joe knows everybody.
Yes, he
Joe
does.
knows players, whether it's from the players from the ice level. He has a great ability to befriend people and to gain their trust. And Joe, I don't know how many phone numbers he has on his phone, but he can dial into anyone around the league, coach, player, GM. If all he needs to do is punch in that
Speed dial.
number, and I just talked to
XYZ.
yeah, and that's where I've been so lucky to have John and then Joe as partners for as long as we've been together is amazing, because they have their finger in tune to everything that's going on around the league, and it makes for just a better all-around broadcast. I think what's happened, what I realize, and it started with JD, but it especially followed with Joe, is that when you talk to coaches or ask for time from coaches of other teams, they give it to us because they respect what we do, they trust us, and I think we give them a pretty fair shake, even though everybody knows who we're rooting for. But I think we give the other team, we realize, and part of it is network experience that all of us had, in that there's two teams trying to win the game, two teams playing, and there are great players on both teams, and we make sure that we acknowledge that fact.
The story that came out of your time with JD, though, was that the production used to feed him the trivia answers. And you always used to say, wow, you just know so much, JD. Did you ever find out that they were doing that to you?
I heard rumors. I thought in the back, how does he know that? And it's the same thing with Joe. All of a sudden, he'll come up with an answer to a trivia question. I said, whoa, how did he get that? So, but I will never accuse them of seeking that, because I have to admit that on occasion, I'll look up. If you're
Google.
short on time, either Google or the media guides, especially the old media guys that we had, the league guides, anything that I can quickly reference. The best story of JD is it was an April 1st game at the old Cap Center in Landover, Maryland, and Sal Messina was our radio analyst at the time, Red Light, just great guy in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And we kind of collaborated, Sal and I, and Joe Whalen was our producer at the time of Rangers hockey. We got a guy to dress up as a Royal Canadian Mountie policeman.
Yeah.
So while we're getting close to going on the air, he walks in and calls JD over and he says, "Can I see your green card, please?" And I don't think JD had it with him. And when he gets nervous, it was like, humana. And that was one of the best April Fool's moments that you'll ever see, is JD panicking that this Canadian policeman was about to arrest him.
That's hysterical. Well, when I spoke to him yesterday too, and obviously the game that stands out to him is the 1994 Stanley Cup winning game, and he actually said that you guys were scheduled to work on the day of the parade, but then you were kidnapped.
Well,
what happened
a couple of stories. I'll try to keep them as quick as possible. First off, Game 7, Rangers and Devils. Here at the Garden, 1-0 Rangers. Valeri Zelepukin scores with 7.7 seconds to go in regulation, sends the game to overtime. It was like we go to whatever we were doing between the end of the game and overtime, and I sit down and I'm like this. He goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "What else can happen to this team?" I mean, we're 7.7 seconds away from the Stanley Cup final, and thank God, you know, they win Game 7 in double overtime. Stéphane Matteau, the winning of the Stanley Cup. I just remember John and I putting our arms around each other because I knew this meant so. Me as a fan, it meant a lot. I know how I felt and the emotion I was feeling. Here's a former New York Ranger. He had put his heart and soul into the Rangers as a player, now as a broadcaster, and it was a great moment. Just there we were, arm in arm, up in the booth, and the Rangers had won the cup. And then the parade, the people at MSG Network felt that everybody would be covering the parade in some fashion. And they came to John and myself and said, "We'd like you to anchor our coverage." So, you know, like I
guess.
I said, "Okay, what else? Hey, I just work here." John was, so he was growly.
Yeah.
We had our production meeting. He said, "Come on, let's go have some breakfast." And he growled through breakfast. And now we go on the air, and we're sending it to Al Troutwig and to Bruce Beck, who are down at City Hall, and the parade's going on, and John's just shaking his head. And then all of a sudden, 2 uniformed police officers come bursting through the door into the studio and say, "You guys, come with us." And we had a white knuckle job in the back seat of a squad car down to City Hall, going in opposite direction of traffic.
Amazing.
And we get to City Hall, and it was another glorious moment.
Amazing. I mean, you've told so many stories about that call. We've heard them all before, but I mean, what could you say? What have you made of what that call has become, what it has meant to Ranger fans, and what your role in it has had an effect on the rest of New York?
It's one of those things that good fortune. You don't plan it. I mean, you think about it. The 2 icings that seeded the end of the game really brought it about.
Right.
Because both John and I started to, this is the end. Because, look, it was. How could Vancouver find a way to score to tie the game? The Rangers were going to win, and no more curses and icing. Oh, well, wait a second. Things could still. And another face-off, and okay, this is the moment everybody's been waiting for. And another
one.
icing. And now the puck is, now it's 1.6 seconds. There ain't no way they're scoring a goal now. I know it. And the puck is dropped, and the waiting is over. And that was the greatest moment, ever as a broadcaster, as a fan, as someone who grew up and understood the history of the New York Rangers. That was just a glorious moment. And when I said this one will last a lifetime, I meant it. I meant it for me. They can win some more. I'll be happy to watch that. But that was the ultimate.
I've been so lucky to work alongside you for the last 5 years, and I've just seen the way that fans flock to you on the road, at home, no matter where we are. What of the fans, the New York sports fans, what role have they played in your journey?
Mollie, it's the greatest thing to have fans come up to you and say that you really had an impact, whether it's fans saying, oh, you and JD and you and Joe taught us the game of hockey, or to have a family where mom and dad and have 8 or 10-year-old kids and say, and they're all dressed in Rangers outfits, and Sam, we love what you do, and you realize that you've impacted their lives, that it's gone from one generation to the next. And father who had season tickets, passing it on to his son, whatever it is, you realize that people are passionate about sports. Hockey is one of those sports that really brings out the passion. You understand that it's very expensive to come to games, and people are dependent on you, on me as a broadcaster, to bring them closer to the team that they love. And that's what I try to do. And I've always felt that if I could transmit the love that I have for the game and for the team and for the players to the fans, then I would have accomplished what I set out to do. And I realize now when people, unsolicited, walk up and say the things they do, that I've been successful in that regard.
Well, my mom always used to say that I've been listening to you since I've been in her belly. What would you say to the fans that are going to be watching you for the rest of this season? What would you want to say to them?
Just enjoy this. Enjoy the moment. I'm trying to enjoy every minute of it. And understand that nothing has changed for this season. I'm giving everything that I have. I want people to remember me in that last season, that I was at the top of my game. And fortunately, we have a terrific team that's entertaining every single night, great personalities that are involved, and just keep enjoying the moment. The hockey has never been better. As I said to you before, the games are just great, and I look forward to the next one. And I want the fans to know that this is a great time for me, and I want to transmit that to them.
Awesome. Well, Sam, on behalf of Rangers fans everywhere, thank you so much for all the love and joy that you have put into your work and your craft. It has captured so many hearts through a TV screen. You will always be synonymous with the New York Rangers, and we all have been so fortunate to have you. So thank you so much, and please enjoy every minute of this next chapter of your life.
Thank you, Mollie. It means a lot. It means a lot coming from you, a colleague. I've been very, very lucky the people that I met along the way who are not part of the team, like yourself and Larry Brooks, your colleague at the Post, and the many, many beat writers who are just wonderful people to be around, to exchange laughs, to exchange good times, and then to cover the team on a regular basis. It's been very special for me, and I thank you right back.